3 years ago, if anyone had suggested that I would find myself in the complex situation I am in today, I would have dismissed the idea as implausible. At that time, I was just 25 years old, married to my husband, who was 29, and we were navigating the early stages of parenthood with our 2-year-old son. Our journey together began with a contrasting backdrop of dating experiences. My own was quite limited, having only been intimate with 2 men prior to meeting my husband. In stark contrast, my husband had a reputation for being a player, someone who frequently dated multiple people at the same time. This reputation led me to harbor suspicions that he might have a commitment issue, which I even began to refer to as a possible obsession. In the early days of our relationship, I felt the need to push for more commitment, ghosting him on occasions to prompt him into making a decision. At that point in our lives, he was seeing others and candidly told me that being exclusive would limit his sexual experiences. Faced with this ultimatum, I made a firm choice to stand my ground. I presented him with a clear decision: either he would invest in our relationship or move on. To my astonishment, he chose to dedicate himself to us, agreeing to be exclusive. Once we established our exclusivity, our intimate life flourished. We engaged in close physical moments nearly every day, sometimes even multiple times in a single day. I discovered, to my surprise, that I was able to match his energy and meet his desires, and I found myself enjoying our intimate life just as much as he did. One of the reasons for my limited experience prior to meeting him stemmed from my religious upbringing, which had instilled in me a sense of restraint regarding romantic relationships. Moving in together brought a surge of happiness. I felt a sense of accomplishment in what I perceived as reining him in. Even his mother expressed disbelief that someone could keep him in check given his history of romantic entanglements. In my excitement and affection, I took on a more investigative approach to ensure his fidelity. I resorted to tracking devices in his car and delving into his social media, yet I found no evidence of infidelity. He appeared to be wholly loyal and committed to our family. When I became pregnant, we decided to formalize our commitment through marriage, and shortly thereafter, I gave birth to our son. However, a noticeable shift occurred in my husband after our child's arrival. He underwent significant changes. He cut his long hair, became increasingly focused on his career, and spent less time with friends. Although I admired these positive developments, I struggled to reconcile them with the person I had initially married. The frequency of our intimate encounters also saw a significant decline, transitioning from daily interactions to merely once a week. Initially, my thoughts wandered to the possibility of infidelity on his part, but my investigations indicated everything was in order. He was working longer hours and earning more money, which accounted for his increased absence at home. Meanwhile, my own sexual desire reached unprecedented levels, prompting me to explore online content to satisfy my needs. This marked a departure from my previous behavior, as I found myself captivated by the visuals and fantasies portrayed on the internet. Unfortunately, the more I indulged in this content, the more intense my desires became, leading me to think about these explicit scenarios even during intimate moments with my husband. One particular fantasy that became increasingly prominent in my mind involved the idea of being intimate with multiple men simultaneously. I recognized how unconventional this thought might seem, yet I found it nearly impossible to dismiss. Despite my husband's wonderful qualities, I began to feel that the spark in our love life was dimming. Frustration crept in as small habits of his became irksome in ways they had never been before. Gradually, it dawned on me that my sexual dissatisfaction was influencing our relationship, and I was acutely aware of the growing distance between us. Given that my husband and I had always excelled in open communication, I knew it was essential to address these issues between us. Skilled at engaging in open conversations regarding our emotions, I made the choice to communicate my frustrations to him directly. Recognizing the importance of intimacy in our relationship, he responded by making a conscious effort to initiate more intimate moments and engage in additional foreplay, a gesture that was undoubtedly a positive step towards rekindling our connection. However, during these intimate encounters, there was a lingering feeling that his heart wasn't fully in it. It seemed as though he approached our physical relationship out of a sense of obligation rather than genuine desire, which left me feeling unfulfilled. In light of these feelings, we had another in-depth discussion about the issue. He expressed sincerity in his attempts to improve the situation, yet despite his efforts, I felt that something was still missing. His actions didn't quite satisfy my emotional and physical needs, leading me to a troubling realization: my life might continue along this unfulfilling path. To cope with this dissatisfaction, I found myself turning to online content, seeking ways to fulfill my sexual desires that were unmet within our relationship. Then one day, my husband returned home with exciting news that he had received a promotion at work, a development that came with increased responsibilities. While most wives might be thrilled at the prospect of their husbands earning more money and advancing their careers, I couldn't help but feel a sense of dread about the implications this promotion might have on our already strained intimate life. I worried that the added pressure from his new role could potentially lead to an even greater lack of connection between us, possibly rendering our intimate moments non-existent. Although I could see his joy over the promotion and didn't want to dampen his spirits with my own concerns, I instinctively masked my true feelings, outwardly projecting happiness while internally grappling with frustration. To express what I was feeling, I began engaging in small behaviors that annoyed him, hoping he would pick up on my discontent and initiate a serious conversation. Fortunately, he eventually recognized that something was bothering me, prompting a much-needed discussion between us. During this discussion, I confided in him about my contemplation of the idea of opening up our relationship, a notion that had been influenced by the online content I had been consuming. I proposed the possibility of exploring an open relationship, but he promptly declined, standing firm in his initial reaction. I didn't want to be overly pushy, yet I found myself raising the topic a few more times out of desperation, only to receive continued rejection. Then, unexpectedly, one day he came home and surprised me by expressing a newfound willingness to consider an open relationship. This sudden shift in his stance caught me off guard, especially given his prior resistance over the weeks. I was curious about what had prompted this change, but I chose to refrain from asking too many questions, fearing that my inquiry might cause him to reconsider his openness to the idea. By this point, I had spent considerable time researching successful open relationships, adopting guidelines that could help preserve the love and connection we shared while also exploring physical encounters with others. Together, we established some straightforward rules designed to reinforce the strength of our relationship amidst these new dynamics. We agreed not to engage with mutual friends or coworkers to safeguard our existing connections. We committed to practicing safe lovemaking in all circumstances and decided against bringing any of our new partners into our home to maintain a sense of separation from our family life. Our son was to remain uninvolved in the aspects of our open relationship, ensuring that our parental duties remained intact. Additionally, we pledged to keep each other informed about our plans and interactions with others, emphasizing the importance of transparency. We clearly defined the boundaries around romantic involvement with new partners, agreeing to avoid behaviors such as moving in together, meeting each other's families, or planning for children. These guidelines were carefully established to help maintain the depth of love we shared as we ventured into the prospect of physical involvement with other people. We also agreed that while developing feelings for others was acceptable, it had to be managed maturely. Trust and transparency became central to our new arrangement, so we decided to share our phone passwords and grant each other access to our social media accounts. In the spirit of open communication, we committed to discussing the details of any interactions with other individuals. These rules seemed balanced, and my husband gave his consent, making it clear that we would revisit and amend our agreements together if needed in the future. With these guidelines in place, I decided to explore this new chapter of our relationship. I joined the dating app Tinder, eagerly swiping right on the most attractive men I encountered, driven by a desire to explore the fantasies that had lingered in my mind for so long. For a significant period, I experienced a wave of mixed emotions as I navigated the complexities of my new relationship dynamic. At first, I was filled with apprehension when I matched with the first 3 men. The nervousness was palpable as I ventured into unfamiliar territory. However, as time went on and I gathered more experiences, that initial anxiety began to dissipate. I found myself engaging with 7 different men, each encounter adding layers to my understanding of this new chapter in my life. Ultimately, I connected with 3 of these men on a more regular basis, establishing a routine that felt comfortable in this phase of our relationship. A particularly vivid memory stands out when I first chose to share my experiences with my husband. I can still picture his expression as I recounted my initial forays into this new lifestyle. Although he tried to appear accepting, I could sense an undercurrent of discomfort, which weighed heavily on my mind. The allure of an open relationship had drawn me in, but I found myself grappling with conflicting feelings when I noticed the hurt in his eyes. Despite these unsettling moments, he reassured me that he was willing to try and come to terms with this new reality, mentioning that he just needed a bit of time to adjust. As the weeks turned into months, I became increasingly cautious about how much I disclosed regarding my other partners. I noticed the emotional toll it was taking on him, especially since, at that point, I had been involved with 7 men while he had only shared intimacy with 2 women. To safeguard his feelings, I deliberately minimized discussions about my encounters, recognizing the strain it was causing in our relationship. However, the situation took a turn when he decided to check my phone and uncovered the truth. My attempts to downplay the extent of my interactions led to a significant rupture between us. This discovery changed everything. Following that moment, he looked at me through a filter of distrust, and the dynamics of our relationship shifted into a strained existence. As things became increasingly toxic, I made the unilateral decision to end the open relationship. The pressures from the 3 men I was seeing who were pushing for commitment added to my stress. Despite my sincere affection for my husband and son, I found myself caught in a dilemma. My husband, unwilling to close off our arrangement, argued that he needed to even the score with me. He insisted that he wouldn't agree to close the relationship until he had been with at least 15 women, equating my interactions with men to his own imagined freedom. I attempted to clarify the distinction between merely conversing with and being intimate with a partner, but he remained unconvinced. From that point forward, our relationship took a nosedive. He began coming home later and later, and the intimacy we once shared completely evaporated. I suspected he was out exploring other opportunities, but later, I discovered that he had lost his job as a consequence of getting involved with multiple women at his workplace. The information about his job loss didn't come directly from him but rather through a third party, which only added to the tension. Instead of taking responsibility, he deflected blame onto me, asserting that my introduction of the open relationship concept had led to his downfall. I reminded him of our agreement not to involve ourselves with co-workers, but he insisted that his constant workload meant that his co-workers were his only viable options. As our relationship continued to unravel, the decision to close the open arrangement did little to repair the damage. My husband withdrew emotionally and physically, often expressing his revulsion toward me by claiming I was tainted by my past interactions and that he couldn't engage with me without thoughts of the other men lingering in his mind. We were stuck in a relentless cycle of conflict, turning our home into a cauldron of toxicity. Amid this chaos, I sought refuge in the arms of one of the men I had been seeing outside my marriage. He seemed to provide the emotional and physical fulfillment that my husband was unable to offer. After I confessed to my husband about this affair, he chose to initiate divorce proceedings, which progressed uncontested due to the lack of significant assets aside from our home. The ultimate resolution granted me primary custody of our son, while my husband began paying child support. Our relationship had reached a point of no return, and we went our separate ways. It wasn't long before I came to realize that the man I had turned to during these turbulent times was not the ideal partner I had initially believed him to be. The dynamic I thought would flourish turned out to be quite different once I began living with him. Adding another layer of complexity to the situation, after we commenced divorce proceedings, my ex-husband secured a better job and began dating a woman who bore a striking resemblance to me. This revelation added a surreal twist to an already complicated scenario, highlighting the unpredictable nature of relationships and how swiftly perceptions can change in the wake of upheaval. Regret weighs heavily on my heart each time I drop off my son and witness the life he shares with my estranged husband, Michael. It is a life I once envisioned for myself and my family, one that I now see slipping away. The memory of the man I was with lingers, but the quick decision to leave him thrust me into another relationship before I had the chance to heal properly from the emotional toll of my divorce. The fallout from that hasty choice took a significant toll on my self-confidence and self-esteem, making the journey ahead feel more daunting. After 2 years of what I can only describe as serial dating, I finally reached a breaking point. I made the conscious decision to step back and reevaluate how I had found myself in this tumultuous situation. It became clear to me that I wished I could turn back time to return to the days when life felt more stable and fulfilling. I often find myself perplexed at how others seem to make open relationships work. For me, it has been nothing short of devastating, transforming me into a version of myself that I don't recognize or particularly like. My name is Jennifer, a 40-year-old woman navigating a painful crossroads. My husband, Michael, who is 43, has made the decision to leave me because of a choice I made that he considers unforgivable. The incident occurred at an office party, a celebratory gathering with my colleagues where we marked surpassing our targets for the year. We were all in high spirits, and before I knew it, I had informed my husband that I might be home late. I had assured him that my work best friend, Stacy, who is 35, would drive me if I ended up too intoxicated to drive safely. As the night progressed, I found myself flirting shamelessly with every attractive company affiliate and colleague in sight. It was as though an invisible force compelled me to act out in ways I hadn't in years. The warmth of my husband's affection felt like a distant memory, and I craved the thrill of being desired. About 2 hours before we were due to leave, I ended up in the restroom with a colleague, let's call him Frank, a charismatic 33-year-old. What transpired in that bathroom stall was reckless sexual activity that sent waves of exhilaration through me. I couldn't resist, especially with the knowledge that my husband no longer engaged with me intimately. The feelings of joy and liberation distracted me from the consequences of my actions. We lost track of time, caught up in the moment until we heard someone enter the stall next to us. We quickly pulled ourselves together, exchanging vows to meet again soon and finish what we had started. The rest of the night was a blur of thoughts centered around Frank. Lying next to my sleeping husband, I found myself fantasizing about him while wrestling with feelings of guilt. Over the next 3 days, Frank and I exchanged text messages constantly, fueling my excitement. By the end of the week, we made plans to meet again, this time at a hotel suite he had reserved for a 2-night stay while in town for business. My apprehension was overshadowed by the thrill of finally experiencing physical intimacy again. In those moments, I foolishly did not consider how Michael would react if he discovered my infidelity. It seemed inconceivable that he would ever find out. Our evening together began with a delightful dinner where work discussions flowed naturally, laced with flirtation and light touches, and the air crackled with sexual tension. As the night unfolded, we crossed boundaries I had not anticipated, leading to encounters that felt both liberating and reckless. The experience was unlike anything I had felt in years, filled with an intensity that was both thrilling and disorienting. We indulged ourselves multiple times that night, losing ourselves in the passion and excitement of our connection. The next morning, however, was a sharp jolt back to reality. Panic engulfed me as I realized I had not informed Michael I would be spending the night away. To my dismay, I found 3 text messages and 10 missed calls from him, which only heightened my anxiety. I hurriedly dressed and returned home around 7 a.m. Relieved to find that Michael was still asleep. The timing was fortuitous, allowing me to take a quick shower and slip into bed next to him undetected. I barely managed to catch 4 hours of sleep before he awoke, and it was clear from his demeanor that he was seething with anger. In that moment, as he questioned where I had been all night, I felt the weight of my choices pressing down on me. I explained that I had gone to Stacy's after a late meeting and had worked on some Excel sheets while we both indulged in a few drinks. I told him I rushed home as soon as I woke up, hoping to avoid escalating his worry. The tension hung in the air, and I braced myself for the consequences of my actions, not fully grasping the impact this would have on our lives moving forward. Despite his irritation at my failure to inform him about working late or my plans to meet Stacy, I successfully convinced him that I had been overwhelmed with work and simply didn't find the time to call. To my surprise, he accepted my explanation for the moment. However, a persistent feeling nagged at me, suggesting that he was not entirely convinced of my innocence. This suspicion became even more compounded when, 2 days prior, I was caught in a rather compromising situation. After messaging Frank to arrange one last meeting before his flight, I was relieved when he agreed, but he insisted on a public place, which seemed reasonable under the circumstances. To maintain my alibi, I informed Michael that I would be having dinner with Stacy and one of our company affiliates to finalize some work papers and get a contract signed. I even provided him with the name of the restaurant where we intended to meet, hoping this would further placate his concerns. Feeling anxious about his potential reaction, I left work early to ensure I arrived at the upscale restaurant on time. Once there, Stacy and I allowed ourselves to relax and enjoy each other's company, flirting and making out as we indulged in the evening. However, our lightheartedness was abruptly interrupted when, about an hour into our rendezvous, Stacy burst into the restaurant, visibly agitated. She grabbed my arm and urgently explained that Michael had called her to ask if I was with her at the restaurant, and he was on his way there. Panic set in as we rushed outside, only to be confronted by Michael himself. He immediately questioned us about our destination, and we hastily told him we were heading home. But he wasn't convinced. Taking my hand, he pressed for details about my whereabouts the previous Saturday, revealing that Stacy had attempted to act as though she was aware of my being at her place, yet it was clear she had no idea of my actual whereabouts on both that night and the previous Friday. In that tense, charged moment, Stacy made the decision to come clean about what she had witnessed on the night of the office party, admitting that she had seen me leave the bathroom with Frank, looking more than just friendly. Although she maintained that she wasn't privy to any further details, her admission hung heavily in the air. Michael, visibly frustrated, led us to his car, instructing Stacy to go home. Once inside the car, he bombarded me with a barrage of questions, demanding to know how many times such incidents had occurred, both before and after that night, and whether anything had transpired in the restaurant's bathroom that very evening. I vehemently swore to him that the first time anything happened was at the office party, where I had been completely intoxicated. Nevertheless, he remained unconvinced and labeled me a liar. Eventually, under the weight of his scrutiny and anger, I confessed that this was not an isolated incident and that I had indeed slept with Frank just the previous Saturday. In his frustration, he pounded the steering wheel and berated me for my foolishness, claiming that I had destroyed the one good thing left in his life. Following that painful outburst, we drove home in an oppressive silence. Upon arriving, he locked himself in our son's old bedroom, and I could hear him talking to his friend Albert throughout the night. Later, he came to our bedroom after I had gotten into bed, delivering the devastating news that he wanted a divorce. He declared that he would keep our home, asserting that I didn't deserve to live in the house we had built together as a family over the last 19 years. He stressed not to inform our son about the separation, as he was going through college exams and would address it when the timing felt right. Lost and overwhelmed, I was left with no clear direction on what to do next. Michael had completely shut down communication, and our last exchange ended with him firmly instructing me to either secure a mortgage through work for an apartment or rent one using my savings, giving me a one-week deadline to move out. The confusion and desperation enveloped me, so I reached out to Frank, confiding in him about the entire situation, hoping for a solution. Frank suggested that I rent a hotel room nearby for a week while I searched for a more permanent solution. I agreed but asked him to wait for me to call him after I finished packing. Even as I faced the reality of losing everything, I found myself turning to the very person responsible for jeopardizing the life I had built with Michael. Currently, I am staying in the hotel room that Frank arranged for me, while Michael remains silent, refusing to communicate any further. I am actively searching for affordable rental options, desperately hoping to secure a mortgage for a place to call home again. The complexities of my current situation regarding the mortgage for the house weigh heavily on my mind. I have made multiple attempts to contact Michael, but it appears that he has either disconnected both his landline and mobile phone or possibly blocked my number on both devices. This lack of communication has left me feeling overwhelmed and disoriented, making it difficult to think clearly about the decisions before me. I find myself torn between the prospect of starting a new chapter in my life with Frank or attempting to reconcile my relationship with Michael, which is fraught with emotional turmoil. In an effort to seek clarity, I reached out to Stacy to discuss an incident from that night when our secret was revealed. During our conversation, she expressed her feelings of guilt for having unknowingly become part of such a complicated affair. Stacy candidly admitted her inability to lie effectively, noting that even if she had been aware of the full situation beforehand, she would not have been able to maintain the facade. Seeking some closure, I attempted to visit our former home, but it felt eerily deserted. The blinds were drawn at an unusually early hour, heightening my sense of unease. Feeling utterly at a loss, I am grappling with these mounting challenges. My current mental state complicates my ability to recall all the intricate details of the events that have transpired, so I urge anyone interested in understanding the full backstory to refer to my previous posts. Frank continues to provide me with support during this tumultuous period, a lifesaver of sorts as I navigate through my emotions. Presently, I find myself renting a van in what could be described as a relatively upscale trailer park, a place I would not have discovered if Frank hadn't facilitated our stay in that hotel room. This new living arrangement is different from what I had initially anticipated. It's not particularly bad, yet it doesn't offer the comfort or stability I had hoped for. Adjusting to this new life has proven to be a significant struggle. It has been a month since I moved out of our home, and Michael has not made any attempts to reach out to me. However, my lawyer recently informed me that Michael has initiated divorce proceedings, with the paperwork now arriving at her office. The stark reality of this situation suggests that my relationship with Michael may be nearing its conclusion. Years of hard work, love, and dedication seem to be unraveling in an unfortunate manner, and the thought of losing my family weighs heavily on my heart. I am particularly anxious about how our son will react to this news. I suspect he will reach out to me once Michael informs him of my absence. The lingering anxiety regarding what Michael may say to our son looms over me. I dread the possibility that he might accuse me of infidelity, and the thought of my child harboring feelings of resentment or disdain towards me is unbearable. My only glimmer of hope in this turbulent time is the thought of reuniting with my son. The notion of seeing him again fills me with both anticipation and trepidation. The idea that he might look at me with disappointment is a thought I cannot entertain for long, as it would be too much for me to bear. Transitioning to another part of my life feels daunting, yet I recognize the importance of sharing my story. I am 37 years old, while she is 31, I work in finance, and she has carved out a successful career in healthcare. Our relationship spanned 6 months, a time frame that may seem brief, yet my feelings for her were unwavering. I trusted her completely when she professed her love for me and her desire to build a future together. There was a palpable sense of happiness when we were together, an emotion that undoubtedly influenced my own well-being. We have never been married, do not have children, and have never lived together. Last winter marked the end of her 4-year relationship, coinciding with my departure from a year-long situation. We met through a mutual friend and immediately connected on several levels. From the onset, both of us expressed a desire to proceed with caution, determined not to rush into another relationship merely as a rebound from our pasts. After her breakup, she took the time to relish her newfound freedom, while I used that period to rebuild my self-identity and regain confidence. This personal growth allowed me to establish clear boundaries, ensuring that I was ready for a meaningful connection. She displayed a mature approach toward intimacy and relationships, which significantly impressed me. Open communication was a core value for her, and she emphasized the importance of respecting each other's boundaries. Furthermore, she articulated her preference for a monogamous relationship, reinforcing the depth of her commitment. Reflecting on these moments now, I recognize there were signs I may have disregarded. I have become aware that she occasionally drinks heavily, a behavior that, while perhaps unassuming at first, now raises concerns about her judgment and the dynamics of our relationship. Despite this, my trust in her and the joy of our shared moments kept me hopeful for what lay ahead, even as the complexities of our situation began to unfold. She uses her past as an excuse to engage in reckless behavior, distancing herself from those moments by attributing them to a different facet of her personality. This approach allows her to sidestep accountability for her actions. While I have observed this tendency on several occasions, I did not detect any indications of infidelity during those times. As a result, I convinced myself that her faithfulness was not something I needed to worry about. This assurance was particularly reinforced by her constant emphasis on the importance of honesty and accountability in our relationship. However, in hindsight, I can't help but feel foolish for choosing to ignore the warning signs, naively hoping they wouldn't result in negative consequences. Just 6 months into our relationship, I felt it was the right moment to propose to her. I genuinely believed that she was the one for me. It never felt like we were rushing into anything. The next logical step in our journey together was for her to move in with me once her lease expired, which would happen shortly after she returned from a planned trip. Before we met, she had already organized an adventurous journey to Africa. Her passion for international travels and meeting new people was evident, as she made it a point to embark on such trips at least once every 3 years. Even though I wouldn't be accompanying her on this trip, we both shared excitement about the incredible opportunity ahead of her. Our constant communication during her absence allowed us to express our feelings openly, leaving no room for doubt or confusion. Upon her arrival in Africa, she encountered some challenges with her prearranged taxi service. This created difficulties in getting in touch with her ride. When she finally gained access to Wi-Fi at the airport, she felt hesitant about relying on airport taxi services in that moment of need. Reaching out to me, I was able to contact the person who was supposed to pick her up, offering her some much-needed support. Her trip was scheduled to last for 2 weeks, during which she intended to explore the wonders of East Africa. Once she settled into her hotel, she shared with me about her experience at the bar downstairs, where she met a man from a different city. This individual was in the country for business and had come with a friend, staying in the same hotel. It was interesting to learn that this newfound acquaintance had also booked the same tour package as her. Since he had taken that tour several times before, he generously offered to act as her local guide, knowing that she did not have anyone familiar in the area. Throughout her trip, we maintained communication via WhatsApp as soon as she connected her phone to a local service called M-Pesa, which is commonly used in that region for payments and phone services. We talked and exchanged messages whenever we could. During this period, she mentioned her encounter with the man and expressed her belief that he was trustworthy. One evening, when we had a phone conversation, she reassured me of her love, which temporarily eased my concerns about her traveling alone. She seemed to thrive in her adventure despite my worries. That was the extent of my knowledge about the stranger she had met at her hotel until her final week in Africa, when she decided to take an unexpected trip to a coastal beach resort. This decision aligned with her desire for flexibility during her travels, so it didn't raise any suspicions for me. However, the trip quickly became chaotic due to flight cancellations and her luggage being temporarily lost, which added layers of stress to her experience. Although she eventually recovered her belongings, the ordeal was trying, and I provided her with support throughout her travel challenges. When the day finally came for her to return, I was filled with palpable excitement. After 2 weeks apart, the thought of being reunited and holding her again made me feel overjoyed. Our affectionate moment at the airport was heartwarming, and I was eager to head home with her. However, during the drive back from the airport, I sensed that something was troubling her. I had been anticipating a romantic evening together at her apartment, but instead, she asked me to sit down. It was in that moment that she delivered a confession that would change everything. She admitted to cheating on me. Engaging in unprotected intimacy with a stranger she had met at the hotel, all within a mere 24 hours of assuring me that she wanted to be exclusive, felt like a sudden and agonizing blow to my heart. It was as if my entire world had flipped upside down, leaving me in a state of shock that I could hardly comprehend. When she saw the pain reflected in my eyes, her initial response was to claim that the affair wasn't consensual and that she had been under the influence of alcohol during this encounter. However, as I examined her phone and discovered multiple pictures, not just with the one man, but also with his friend, all depicting them happily smiling together on the beach and during a safari, her narrative began to unravel. Eventually, she confessed to me that her infidelity involved not one, but both men at the same time.